Pastor Roy Gerhardt from Galloway United Methodist Church in Franklin, Pennsylvania, sharing a few words of encouragement to help us follow after Jesus. How grown up is your faith? Are you still trying to get through your adult life, building on children's faith, a child's understanding of the world? Are you still looking at the Bible as if it's a set of children's stories? Or have you grown up to live your life of faith in a real world? The story of David and Goliath falls into a category like a lot of other stories in the Old Testament. Many of us have learned them as children because these people are so exciting, and the stories of their life are so dynamic, and we learn them with the enthusiasm of children and remember these characters as standouts for our whole life. But for some of us, we've read them and continue to read them as if they are just children's stories, almost like they're little fairy tales. But there's nothing that could be further from the truth. These are stories about real life, filled with real hardship, danger, and terrifying violence. Sometimes, in fact, when we share these stories with our children, we try to soften some of the details. Like with David and Goliath. We want to talk about David and his sling and being able to knock that giant off of his feet with a well-placed stone. And may want to omit the details of him then pulling the sword from Goliath's sheath and cutting his head off with it. These are genuinely violent stories of war and battles and danger. They're not by any means just children's stories and fables, little fairy tales of stars and rainbows. But that's exactly where some of us have left our faith. Instead of having adult-styled faith, we are still living it out as a children's story. And this is where many people lose their faith. They come to encounter adult problems, real tragedies in life. And we're seeing our world torn apart with war and violence, terrorism that is so terrifying that we don't know how any good God could be out there and allow all of this to go on. In fact, when we experience it even on a personal scale of, being diagnosed with cancer or a terrible accident that leaves someone debilitated, the suffering of grief and loss, or the brokenness of a divorce that tears a family apart. We experience all of these things and think, how could God be there if life is so hard? We have this idea that our life should be rosy and happy and filled with sunshine. And if it's not, then maybe God doesn't exist. Maybe there's no God out there at all. But that's a child's idea. That's a childish faith that we're trying to live in a real world. And we need to go back and read these stories, not as children's tales, but we need to recognize the real grown-up quality of these stories, that these are people in the Bible who encountered real life, adult-sized problems. They were struck by tragedy and crisis. These are battles that they had to engage in. And we need to have with them adult-sized faith to meet those battles. David was no child coming out into the battlefield. He was a man whose faith had grown up. And it didn't just happen that he showed up on that battlefield and ran out with a smile on his face to have this cheery encounter with Goliath. He had built a mature faith through battles and struggles and trials and adversities in his life that brought him to that day with the maturity to trust God when the battle was on the line, to believe in God whenever the crisis presented. That's adult-sized faith. That's what it is when we are grown up and mature, trusting in God and believing that when the problems come in this world dominated by darkness, that it is then that God shines the brightest. May God bless you today, and as you share his good news, may God make you a blessing wherever he takes you.